Welcome back to The Deep Dive. Today, we are taking on something that, well, often feels like dry paperwork organizational structure. But if you look closely, the structure isn't just some boring chart. It's really the hidden force that determines whether any organization, from a startup to a military unit, can actually execute its mission.
That's a perfect way to frame it. You see this really dramatically in the U.S. Marine Corps. For decades, their standard 13-person rifle squad was celebrated. I think one author called it the most brilliant tactical formation devised in the last half-century.
Wow.
Yeah, it was like the definition of optimized efficiency.
So what happens when a structure that brilliant runs into, modern warfare intelligence?
It changes completely. In 2018, Commandant Robert Neller kicked off what was, arguably the most sweeping change to Marine infantry organization in maybe 70 years.
70 years.
Yeah. They recognized that modern battles rely so heavily on digital intelligence, from technology like surveillance drones. So they fundamentally restructured the squad. They added an assistant squad leader and, crucially, a specialized systems operator, someone focused solely on tech integration.
Which meant a pretty brutal trade-off, I imagine.
Exactly. To fit in the new specialists without making the unit bigger, they had to cut the squad size down to 12.
So they lost a rifleman.
They lost one rifleman per fire team. They literally traded human rifle power for digital intelligence capability. And that kind of structural shift, that is management today. Whether you're a P&G cutting product lines or Standard Chartered simplifying reporting structures.
And before we really dive into the blueprints of design, we should probably acknowledge the messy human side of this. We constantly hear flat is better, flexibility is key, all that. But there's research, I think it was in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology.
Oh yeah, I know the one.
It suggests people are often naturally drawn to hierarchy. It actually lessens the stress of uncertainty for them.
It provides comfort.
All right.
A clear box to sit in. That's why the Zappos story is so fascinating.
The online retailer.
Yeah. When they moved to that completely self-governed, bossless structure, over 200 people, a significant chunk of their workforce, took severance pay and just left.
They were literally paid to quit.
Paid to quit because they preferred the stress relief of clear vertical reporting lines.
Imagine being paid to quit because you refuse to have fewer bosses. That really kind of throws that whole flat is better mantra out the window, doesn't it?
It certainly complicates it.
So our mission today is to give you the blueprint, the core concepts, and, the factors that decide which structural choice works best for your strategic goals, even if maybe it makes some of your employees a bit uncomfortable.
Okay, let's unpack this. Starting with the foundational vertical building blocks. We have to start with some definitions, right?
Right.
Organizing is simply figuring out how to point all your resources, your people, your money at the strategic goals you want to hit.
So strategy is the what? Organizing is the how.
Exactly. And the organization structure is the framework that comes out of that.
Yeah.
It defines tasks, reporting relationships, coordination systems,
Yeah.
all of it.
The absolute foundation of that has to be division of labor or work specialization.
Right. This is just the degree to which we break down a large task into smaller, separate jobs.
Like on a simple factory floor, bottling, quality control, maintenance.
Each one is a specialized job. And we see this specialization shift dramatically when strategy changes.
Okay, how so?
Well, think about Walmart. When they decided they absolutely had to compete better against Amazon's e-commerce dominance, what did they do? They created a new specialized position, the global CTO, Chief Technology Officer.
Okay.
Or Warner Media adding a CDIO, a Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer. These specialized roles pop up specifically to meet new strategic needs.
But I know there's a downside to getting too specialized.
Absolutely. The moment you start dividing jobs too narrowly, you risk boredom, isolation.
Yeah.
And critically, it can really hinder the coordination you need for the final product or service to actually succeed.
Okay. So next up, the vertical spine is the chain of command. That unbroken line showing who reports to whom.
Yep. And we need to remember the two key principles here. First is unity of command.
One supervisor.
You report to one supervisor. The second is the scalar principle, which is just a fancy term for a clearly defined line of authority running from the CEO all the way down to the frontline employee.
Right, clear lines.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Authority isn't just some legal right bestowed from above. There's the acceptance theory of authority.
Okay.
Which basically says a manager only truly has authority if the subordinates choose to accept their commands.
Choose to accept.
Yeah. If the command falls outside what they see as their zone of acceptance, they might just Ignore it.
Yeah.
The person in the chair might have the title, but execution relies on the person below actually accepting that authority.
That is a powerful idea. Authority is always sort of conditional. And we have a really stark example of what happens when that chain of command breaks down. The 2010 BP Transocean Deepwater Horizon explosion.
Oh, absolutely. A nightmare scenario. Confusion just reigned supreme because the lines of authority between the rig owner, Transocean, and the BP staff were so unclear.
So people didn't know who was in charge.
Exactly. Crew members knew an emergency shutdown was needed, but there was chaos over who actually had the authority to give the final sign-off. That lack of a clear scalar principle contributed directly to the disaster.
Wow. Now, compare that to a structure that deliberately challenges unity of command. Cognizant Technology Solutions uses this two-in-a-box model.
Right. They assign two equally responsible managers to a single project. Usually one is in India, the other is at the client site.
Two bosses for one project.
Yep. It works for them because it really enhances customer responsiveness, but structurally, yeah, it's a high-wire act. Definitely breaks the traditional rules.
Okay. Moving on, we tackle span of management or span of control.
Pretty straightforward concept. This is just the number of employees reporting to a supervisor.
And historically, the rule of thumb was what, like 7 to 10 people?
Yeah, something like that. But it's with technology making communication so much easier. Lean organizations are seeing spans of 30, 40, maybe even higher.
And that span directly determines whether your organization is tall or flat.
Exactly. A narrow span means lots of management levels, a tall pyramid. A wide span means fewer levels. A flat structure.
Like McDonald's, I read they cut 2 management levels specifically to flatten things out.
They did, explicitly to speed up decision-making.
So what favors having a larger span? When can a manager handle more people?
Well, it's mostly about efficiency. If the subordinates' tasks are really routine and similar, if they're highly trained, or if there are clear rules and good IT support systems in place,
then the supervisor doesn't need to be as intensely involved.
Precisely, which allows them to manage more people effectively.
Okay. And finally, for the vertical piece, we hit centralization versus decentralization. This is critical.
Yeah.
Where does the decision-making power actually sit?
Right. Centralization keeps decisions way up at the top. Decentralization pushes decisions downward, closer to the action, closer to the customer.
And the benefits of decentralization can be pretty dramatic, especially in a crisis.
Oh, for sure. After Hurricane Katrina, Mississippi Power got power restored in just 12 days, which was incredibly fast.
How'd they do it?
They credited a lot of that speed to a decentralized management system. It empowered staff out at the substations to make quick, on-the-spot decisions without waiting for corporate approval way up the chain.
But the risks are just as high on the flip side. The Wells Fargo scandal.
That was partly blamed on excessive decentralization. It fostered this super aggressive sales culture, leading low-level employees to open millions of fake accounts.
And the response from the new CEO?
He actually increased centralization, pulled back control over cultural norms and sales practices.
So centralization isn't inherently bad then, it's a tool.
Exactly. Boeing centralized safety oversight after the 737 MAX crashes because, well, they needed tight control during a major crisis. Whole Foods centralized its purchasing to get better buying power and cut costs. It's all about matching the decision style to the strategic need at that moment.
Okay, so if centralization fixes Wells Fargo, but decentralization was key after Katrina, how do managers even begin to group all these different roles and decision styles together in the first place?
That brings us perfectly to departmentalization. Basically, the 5 fundamental ways companies group positions.
Let's start with the traditional models. First up.
The vertical functional approach. This is probably the most common. You group people by similar skills and resource. You use marketing, finance, HR, engineering, you name it.
Like Southwest Airlines, they rely heavily on this, right? For deep expertise in groups like maintenance or flight operations.
Exactly. The big advantage here is economies of scale and really deep skill development within those functions.
But the disadvantage is notorious. The organizational silo.
The silo, yeah.
Yeah.
Communication across functions tends to be poor. Decisions pile up at the top because, maybe marketing isn't talking effectively to R&D.
And the response to changes in the market can be painfully slow.
Right. And that structural failure, that slowness, often forces companies to switch to the divisional approach.
Okay, how's that different?
This groups the organization based on its output. So it could be a specific product, a service, a geographic region, or even a customer group.
And the idea is to solve the silo problem.
Exactly. by integrating all the necessary functions, marketing, R&D, sales, within one single division focused on that output.
Right. Like P&G uses, what, 6 different product divisions?
Yep. Or Alphabet, Google's parent company, they have separate divisions like DeepMind for AI and Waymo for self-driving cars, trying to foster innovation in those distinct areas.
And Disney reorganized the Disney Channel into geographic divisions.
To make sure content felt culturally relevant in different parts of the world. Good example.
So divisional structures are flexible, responsive to customer needs. Coordination within the division is great.
Excellent, usually. But the critical trade-off is resource duplication.
Ah, right. You might end up with 3 different divisions, all running their own separate R&D departments or marketing teams.
Exactly. Which costs the company potentially vast economies of scale that they'd get in a functional structure.
Okay. And that takes us to the real head-scratcher, the matrix approach.
The ultimate structural compromise, maybe. This is where things get really complicated because it tries to combine functional, that vertical authority, and divisional, the horizontal authority, at the same time.
And it explicitly violates that unity of command principle we talked about.
It does. In a matrix, employees typically report to 2 bosses.
2 bosses.
Yeah. A functional manager, say the VP of engineering, and a project or product manager who's focused on a specific output.
Wait. If the downsides are so intense, I mean, confusion, conflict, tons of time wasted in meetings resolving who's in charge, why would anyone ever choose a matrix structure? Why deal with 2 bosses?
That's a fair question, because it can be highly effective in really complex, rapidly changing environments, especially when you need to manage multiple complex projects simultaneously.
How so?
It's actually a very efficient way to use specialized human resources. Instead of hiring, say, 3 separate top-tier engineers for 3 different product divisions,
You hire one.
you hire one really good engineer, and you share that specialist across all 3 projects. It maximizes flexibility with your top talent.
But it demands extreme communication skills from everyone involved.
Oh, absolutely. You pay the cost of potential confusion to gain efficiency in sharing those critical, often scarce resources.
Fascinating trade-off. Okay, let's move to the more contemporary, maybe innovative structures, starting with the team approach.
Right. This is one of the most widespread trends we've seen recently. The team approach uses either cross-functional teams or permanent teams to basically delegate authority further down and increase flexibility.
Like total attorneys, they used cross-functional teams to speed things up.
Yeah, they use them to accelerate project stages by ensuring everyone needed for a specific task was working together right from the start, not waiting for handoffs between departments.
And then you have the bossless extremes we mentioned earlier. Zappos tried it, but maybe the most dramatic example is China's Hair Group.
Oh, Hair is radical. They operate using over 4,000 self-organizing microenterprises, or MEs.
4,000? What are they?
They're essentially small, autonomous teams. Each one has full P&L profit and loss responsibility. They have the autonomy to hire, fire.
Wow.
They completely break down those rigid functional walls. It creates a structure that's incredibly fast and almost entirely market-driven from the bottom up.
So teams can boost morale, improve coordination, but they also create conflict, right? Dual loyalties.
Definitely. Is the employee loyal first to their project team or to their original home department, like engineering?
And there's a risk of too much decentralization, isn't there? Where a team makes a decision that's great for their little group, but maybe bad for the organization as a whole.
That's a constant tension with team-based structures. Which brings us to maybe the ultimate in structural freedom, the virtual network approach.
Okay, what's that?
Here, the core firm basically subcontracts almost all its major functions, manufacturing, logistics, sometimes even R&D to separate outside companies.
But it coordinates everything from a small central hub.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Nike was really the pioneer here, right? They kept design and marketing in-house, but outsourced almost all the manufacturing.
And for an extreme version, you mentioned GitLab.
Yeah, GitLab is amazing. Over 600 remote employees, I think, in like 54 countries, with literally 0 physical offices. It's all coordinated virtually.
The advantage has got to be extreme flexibility, global reach, and the lowest overhead imaginable. Super lean.
Definitely. But the cost, a significant lack of hands-on control, and high uncertainty because the boundaries of the firm are so weak, so permeable.
And employee loyalty might suffer. Corporate culture.
It can, yeah. When you rely heavily on external contracts, workers might feel easily replaceable. It can be harder to build that strong, cohesive culture.
Okay, so we've focused a lot on the vertical controls and how we group departments, but the modern reality, as you said, is that success really depends on horizontal coordination.
Absolutely. Breaking down those silos between functions, between teams, between divisions.
That's where the real action is.
Exactly. And digitally advanced companies rely heavily on this cross-functional collaboration. Look at CarMax, for example.
What do they do?
They use these empowered teams, typically a product manager, a developer, and a customer experience designer, all focused together on hitting specific KPIs, key performance indicators.
So what are the mechanisms for that coordination?
Well, they can be temporary, like task forces.
Yeah.
AT&T created these temporary work streams after acquiring Time Warner just to integrate operations smoothly.
Or they can be permanent roles.
Right, like project managers. These folks often sit outside the traditional functional departments. Their whole job is coordinating everything, production, advertising, sales, for a specific product line. General Mills uses product managers like this extensively.
And the highest level of this integration, you called it relational coordination.
Yes. This is more about the culture and relationships. It's frequent, timely, problem-solving communication that happens because people have shared goals, shared knowledge, and crucially, mutual respect.
It's the soft stuff that makes the structure work.
It really is. It's why we saw that big trend towards open offices and huddle rooms. Places like National Geographic did this explicitly designed to force that frequent informal interaction, make it easier for those relationships to form.
Okay, this all leads to the critical synthesis, right? How do you choose the right blend of vertical control and horizontal coordination for your situation?
And this is where the mechanistic versus organic continuum comes in. It's a really useful way to think about it.
Okay, break that down.
Think of the mechanistic structure like a well-oiled, highly regulated factory machine. It's bureaucratic, defined by high specialization, a strict, tall hierarchy, lots of centralization, formal rules.
Very controlled.
Very controlled. This works best when the environment demands stability and hyper-efficiency. Think mass production, maybe some government agencies. Predictable environments.
And the other end, organic.
Right. Think of an organic structure more like an adaptive biological ecosystem. It's defined by low specialization roles or more flexible, a flatter hierarchy, decentralized authority, much more informal communication.
So adaptable, flexible.
Exactly. This works best when the goal is innovation, rapid change, dealing with complex or dynamic environments. Think startups, consulting firms.
And the choice between mechanistic and organic, it's entirely determined by these contingency factors.
Pretty much. The idea is that structure is contingent on or it has to follow strategy and environment. First, strategy itself.
How so?
Well, if your core strategy is innovation and new product development, you probably need a more organic structure to allow for that flexibility in communication. If your strategy is being the lowest cost producer, you likely need a mechanistic structure for tight control and efficiency.
Makes sense. Second factor.
Size. Just sheer size matters. Organizations with, say, over 2,000 employees tend naturally towards more specialization, more formalization, more rules. It's just harder to stay purely organic and informal when you get really big.
Okay. Third.
Technology. Or maybe you better put the complexity of your core workflow. There was a classic study by Joan Woodward.
Oh yeah, Woodward's study.
It showed the most effective structure actually depends on how you make things. Mass production, like an assembly line. That works best with a mechanistic structure.
Okay, that seems obvious.
But here's the interesting part. Both small batch production, think custom work, craft items, and continuous process production, like running a complex chemical plant, they both work best with an organic structure.
Wait, why is a chemical plant, which sounds really stable and automated, better suited to an organic structure? That seems counterintuitive.
It does at first glance. But continuous process technology is so complex, so automated, that when something does go wrong, it's usually a high-stakes, non-routine emergency. You need highly skilled, flexible staff who can communicate quickly and make fast, often decentralized decisions to handle the unexpected. And that demands an organic, adaptive structure, not rigid rules.
That makes perfect sense when you put it that way. Okay, and the final contingency factor.
Environmental uncertainty. Basically, how stable or dynamic is the world outside your organization? If you face high uncertainty, fast product innovation cycles, intense global competition, shifting regulations, you need the flexibility of an organic design.
And stable, predictable environments.
They suit the tight control and efficiency of a mechanistic design much better. Less need for constant adaptation.
Okay, so to synthesize all of this, Organizational design isn't like picking from a menu, is it? It's really about alignment.
Exactly. It's a careful balancing act. You're balancing those vertical controls, authority, span of control, centralization, with the horizontal mechanisms, teams, networks, coordination, and it all has to be determined by who you are, which is your strategy, and the ground you're fighting on, which is your environment.
Which brings us nicely to our final provocative thought for today. Given how many of these modern structural choices we talked about, team, matrix, virtual network, really revolve around increased flexibility and often outsourced expertise, the very definition of the workforce itself seems to be changing dramatically.
It absolutely is. The contingent worker, the freelancer, the independent contractor, the non-permanent staff hired for specific projects, has been described by some experts as potentially the dominant form of the future workforce.
Wow.
And for management, this means that the traditional office-centric command and control structure is becoming, well, maybe obsolete in many sectors.
So future management effectiveness is going to require a huge shift, maybe towards a dramatically more people-centered approach.
I think so. Managers are going to need, or do need, the skills to effectively lead and motivate these high-performing teams in very different, often virtual or networked work environments.
The organizational structure of the future might be less about the solid lines on an org chart, less about the physical walls of an office, and much more about the invisible connections, the contracts, the relationships holding all that distributed talent together.
That's a fascinating challenge, and definitely a deep dive for another time.